Lady, and welcome. Hey, we got a nice springtime kind of day out. It's been sort of a spring kind of week, and we've been busy building one of those do-it-yourself, what do they call them, self-watering gutter gardening systems. You look them up on YouTube, you can find some videos or whatever. Anyway, so it's been a spring day, garden time. A lot of stuff going on this spring, a lot of happenings, a lot of doings, especially in this Lenten season. We want to think about what Lent means. Lent's about facing your conscience, about looking inside yourself, owning your side of the street, as they say in recovery lingo, which I learned as a clinician. So, to help do that, we're going to have a little bit of story time today. There's a doctor, a Sioux doctor who lived back in the early 1900s, who by the name of Frank B. Lindeman, who wrote down a bunch of old Lakota stories. They're, Sioux is the people, and Lakota is their religious tradition and spiritual tradition. So he wrote a bunch of these stories down. We're going to share one of them today because it's very appropriate to the Lenten season. First, let's do some scripture readings. They're a little long for this Sunday, but I'm going to go read them anyway. Psalm 32. Happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose wrongdoing is covered. Happy are those to whom God imputes no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. While I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my wrongdoing to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to God, and you forgave the guilt of my wrongdoing. Therefore let all who are faithful offer prayer to you. At a time of distress, the rush of mighty waters shall not reach me. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. I will instruct you and teach you of the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Do not be like a horse or a mule without understanding, whose temper must be curbed with bit and bridle, else it will not stay near you. Many are the torments of the wicked, but steadfast love surrounds those who trust in God. Be glad in Jehovah and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, all you upright in heart. Wow, intense today. This is all about guilt, shame, owning your side of the street. And our reading from the New Testament is Luke 15:1 through 3, 11b through 32. I don't know why they broke it up. They just did. I'm going to read it. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property to dissolute living. He wasn't living all that life. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he went off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandal on his feet. And get the fattest calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and he came and approached the house. He heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he got him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. Yes. It's very powerful when you think about the two together, Psalm 32 and Luke's reading today. Both of them acknowledge that we do wrong. The second son tells you where his heart really was, where his motive was. It was all about himself. He was thinking only of himself. Yeah. You know, makes you wonder how many people really have a willingness to get real about the quality of their relationship with God and the quality of their spirituality. But think only of themselves. Think of what's convenient, what's easy, instead of what's the next right thing to do, according to God, and not themselves or their culture or their peers. What's the next right thing to do? Benefits everyone, and not just oneself. And in that kind of framework there, when we're thinking about that, it leads us right into this story I'm going to share. The name of this story is Old Man and His Conscience. Again, it is a Sioux story. You know, I'm not Sioux, not Lakota, or Dakota. So I've neglected sharing some of their stories. I've shared Cherokee stories, I've shared some other stories. But I spent a lot of time with Lakota Sioux people, and many years, many ceremonies, many curings, a lot of stuff happened. And I wanted to take an opportunity during this season and this spring to share some of their stories. So we're going to start with this one. There are many others that you can look up, and this time we're going to start with this one. Old Man and His Conscience. Not so many miles away from the village, the great mountain range so divides the streams that are born there, that their waters are offered as tribute to the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic oceans. In this wonderful range, the Indians believe the winds are made, and that they battle for supremacy over Gunsight Pass. I have heard an old story too that is said to have been generally believed by the Blackfeet in which a monster bull elk that lives in Gunsight Pass lords it over the winds. This elk creates the north wind by flapping one of his ears, and the south wind by the same use of his other. I am inclined to believe that the winds are made in that pass myself, for they are seldom at rest, especially at this season of the year. Tonight the wind was blowing from the north, and filmy white clouds were driven across the face of the nearly full moon, momentarily veiling her light. Lodge poles creaked and strained at every gust of wind, and sparks from the fires inside the lodges sped down the wind to fade and die. In his lodge, War Eagle waited for us, and when we entered, he greeted us warmly, but failed to mention the gale. "I have been waiting," he said. "You are late, and the story I shall tell you is longer than many of the others." Without further delay, the storytelling commenced. Once, old man came upon a lodge in the forest. It was a fine one, and painted with strange signs. Smoke was curling from the top, and thus he knew that the person who lived there was at home. Without calling or speaking, he entered the lodge and saw a man sitting by the fire smoking his pipe. The man didn't speak, nor did he offer his pipe to old man, as our people do when they are glad to see visitors. He didn't even look at his guest, but old man had no good manners at all. He couldn't see that he wasn't wanted, and as he looked about the man's lodge and made himself at home, the linings were beautiful and were painted with fine skill. The lodge was clean and the fire was bright, but there was no woman about. Leaning against the backrest, old man filled his own pipe and lighted it with a coal from the man's fire. Then he began to smoke and look around, wondering why the man acted so strangely. He saw a star that shone down through the smoke hole and the tops of several trees that were near the lodge. Then he saw a woman way up in the treetop and right over the lodge. She looked young and beautiful and tall. "Whose woman is that up there in the treetop?" asked old man. "She's your woman if you can catch her and will marry her," growled the man. "But you will have to live here and help me make a living." "I'll try to catch her, and if I do, I will marry her and stay here. For I am a great hunter and can easily kill what meat we want," said old man. He went out of the lodge and climbed the tree after the woman. She screamed, but he caught her and held her, although she scratched him badly. He carried her into the lodge and there renewed his promise to stay there always. The man married them, and they were happy for 4 days. But on the 5th morning, old man was gone with all the dried meat in the lodge, the thief. When they were sure that the rascal had run away, the woman began to cry, but not so the man. He got his bow and arrows and left the lodge in anger. There was snow on the ground, and the man took the track of old man, intending to catch and kill him. The track was fresh, and the man started on a run, for he was a good hunter and as fast as a deer. Of course, he gained on old man, who was a much slower traveler, and the sun was not very high when the old thief stopped on a hilltop to look back. He saw the man coming fast. "This will never do," he said to himself. "A strange person will catch me. I know what I shall do. I shall turn myself into a dead bull elk and lie down. Then he will pass me, and I can go where I please." He took off his moccasins and said to them, "Moccasins, go on toward the west. Keep going and making plain tracks in the snow toward the big water where the sun sleeps. The strange one will follow you, and when you pass out of the snowy country, you can lose him. Go quickly, for he is close upon us." The moccasins ran away as old man wanted them to, and they made plain tracks in the snow leading away to the big water. Old man turned into a dead bull elk and stretched himself near the tracks the moccasins had made. Up the hill came the man, his breath short from running. He saw the dead elk and thought it might be Old Man playing a trick. He was about to shoot an arrow into the dead elk to make sure, but just as he was about to let the arrow go, he saw the tracks the moccasins had made. Of course, he thought the moccasins were on Old Man's feet, and that the carcass was really that of a dead elk. He was badly fooled and took the tracks again. On and on he went, following the moccasins over hills and rivers. Faster than before went the man, and still faster traveled the empty moccasins, the trail growing dimmer and dimmer as the daylight faded. All day long and all of the night the man followed the tracks without rest or food, and just at daybreak he came to the shore of the big water. There, right by the water's edge, stood the empty moccasins, side by side. The man turned and looked back. His eyes were red and his legs were trembling. "Caw, caw, caw," he heard a crow say. Right over his head he saw the blackbird and knew him too. "Ho, old man, you were that dead bull elk. You fooled me, and now you are a crow. You think you will escape me, do you? You will not, for I too know magic and am wise." With a stick, the man drew a circle in the sand. Then he stood within the circle ring and sang a song. Old Man was worried and watched the strange doings from the air overhead. Inside the circle, the man began to whirl about so rapidly that he faded from sight. And from the center of the circle, there came an eagle. Straight at the crow flew the eagle, and away toward the mountains sped the crow in front. The crow knew that the eagle would catch him, so that as soon as he reached the trees on the mountains, he turned himself into a wren and sought the small bushes under the tall trees. The eagle saw the change and at once began turning over and over in the air. When he had reached the ground, instead of an eagle, a sparrowhawk chased the wren. Now the chase was fast indeed, for no place could the wren find in which to hide from the sparrowhawk. Through the brush, into trees, among the weeds and grass, flew the wren with the hawk close behind. Once the sparrowhawk picked a feather from the wren's tail, so close was he to his victim. It was nearly over with the wren when he suddenly came to a park along a riverside. In this park were 100 lodges of peoples, and before a fine lodge there sat the daughter of the chief. It was growing dark and chilly, but still she sat there looking at the water. The sparrowhawk was striking at the wren with his beak and talons when the wren saw the young woman and flew straight to her. So swift he flew that the young woman didn't see him at all, but she felt something strike her hand. And when she looked, she saw a bone ring on her finger. This frightened her, and she ran inside the lodge where the fire kept the shadows from coming. Old Man had changed into the ring, of course, and the sparrowhawk didn't dare to go into the lodge. So he stopped outside and listened. This is what he heard Old Man saying. "Don't be frightened, young woman. I am neither a wren nor a wren. I am Old Man, and that sparrowhawk has chased me all day, and for nothing. I have never done him harm, and he bothers me without reason." "Liar! Forked-tongued!" cried the sparrowhawk. "Believe him not, young woman. He has done wrong. He is wicked, and I am not a sparrowhawk, but conscience. Like an arrow I travel straight and fast. When he lies or steals from his friends, I follow him. I talk all the time, and he hears me, but lies to himself and says he does not hear. You know who I am, young woman. I am what talks inside a person. The old man heard what the sparrowhawk said, and he was ashamed for once in his life. He crawled out of the lodge. Into the shadows he ran away, away into the night and the darkness, away from himself. You see, said War Eagle as he reached for his pipe. Old man knew that he had done wrong, and his heart troubled him, just as yours will bother you if you do not listen to the voice that speaks within yourselves. Whenever that voice says a wicked thing, it is wicked, no matter who says it or not. But no matter who says, it is not. Yes, it is very hard for a man to hide from himself. Oh. What a powerful story that is. A story that comes from a long time ago, as spoken by the old ones. A story of moral teaching, just as the readings that we had this morning in the parable that you saw spoken. Yeah. You know, the story that we saw here in Luke is told every spring, time and again. Two sons, both are selfish. One takes his wealth and runs off and lives a craziness. And then he comes to his senses and begs forgiveness and second chance, even be a slave, a servant. Instead, because of his humility and his willingness to face his conscience, he is greeted back as a loved son. The other one, being selfish, holding on to his self-righteousness, his arrogance, his belief in moral superiority. So much so that love, compassion, tolerance, and hospitality are driven from his heart. And then when his father confronts him, he is ashamed. Just as old man was ashamed when his conscience confronted him. In the parable, the father is his conscience and the sons are you and me. Do you listen to your conscience? Or like old man, do you try to keep running away? Got a lot to think about. Be well. Walk in beauty. Got a guy gonna hunt eat. All sit down. Wide open.